she's an older lady as well, Harry. I mean, she's not 20 years old. She's 50 plus. She needs the protein, and she's not going to be getting it eating bloody salads all day. So there we go, guys. She's had a stroke, and she's absolutely adamant about getting it on recording to pump out and put on our YouTube video. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at a brilliant video, apparently by Beth. All the science will be packed into this short, concise video. And hopefully we'll share some stuff as well, which perhaps you might not have seen. I'm going to bring the screen up now. We're going to go through it quickly and just see what's going on, what this absolute lunatic has to say about carnivore diets and strokes.
Hi there, I'm Beth with 50 Plus Beauty, and I'm here to discuss something kind of personal with you, and that is the progress that I've made in my way of thinking and in my lifestyle choices since I had my stroke. And as those of you who follow my channel, you may remember that on August 15th, about 4 months ago, just under 4 months ago, I had a stroke. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I was in the basement doing my weight routine, and all of a sudden my left side went numb. My face went numb on the left side. I couldn't look very good at that point, although that was the last thing I cared about at that moment. I ran up the stairs and said, "Oh, and I'm having a stroke. Call 911, call 911. And Alan had the foresight, as we were waiting for the ambulance, to say, "Beth, get your cell phone and record yourself having this stroke, because maybe you'll be able to help other women." And
so there we go, guys. She's had a stroke, and she's absolutely adamant about getting it on recording to pump out and put on our YouTube video. Do you have any sort of thoughts towards that, Harry?
Well, look, strokes can be caused from a lot of things, but she has got an underlying medical condition, which I want to actually discuss and get into. You know, being on a diet for 1 year or half a year or even 2 or 3 years will have no effect. It doesn't matter what the diet is on any pathology. It takes 1 or 2 decades before you can get any pathology. So it's completely and utterly nonsense, the things that she's claiming, and even more nonsense that she contacted Esselstyn and basically talked about some of the vagoonerized, approaches and all that. First of all, his study was, what he actually shows in his study was actually from another study. It wasn't actually from the study that he was doing. So he used data from another study in a study, and it wasn't even controlled. So it was completely and utterly nonsense. Bart's already, gone through that study and actually debunked it and shown quite clearly how problematic it was. And also the measurements that were done by 2 different groups, which means that the same approach to measurement wasn't done, and the difference was very minor. So you couldn't even notice whether there was an improvement or not. So there's a lot of confounding, and he's never actually repeated the study, and no other research Vagoon has actually repeated the study. It's pretty much a bust. And when we actually look at the other vagoonerized vegetarian or low-fat vegan diets that have actually been looked at by Christopher Gartner and many others within that community, they've also had only good results against the standard diet, which is a Randle cycle activating inflammatory diet, which is the standard Western diet, basically now, as it's called. It used to be the standard American, now standard Western, which is just processed food garbage with a lot of seed oils and refined sugars. But most of those other research that's been done, like the direct study in Israel, and the study that was done that put the Ornish diet against the Atkins diet, against the Learn diet, which is the nutritionist diet, and the Zone diet, which was called the A to Z study done by Christopher Gartner, who is a well-known plant-based academic. It actually showed that the Atkins diet was superior to all of them. And it actually, and that was on the weight loss. But even when they actually drilled down and looked at inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, a whole lot of other markers, lipid, the whole lot, on average, they were much better than all the other groups. So, sure. And he got a lot of stick for that from Ornish, who was really chastised him for actually including Atkins within the actual study group that he actually had done. So since then, he's gone back to doing these ridiculous short-term studies, because that was done over a year. The short-term little studies manufactured in such a way to basically push certain narratives. So all I can say is, as an academic, he should be ashamed of himself, what he's doing, and he's got involved with a whole lot of other longevity retards that basically have no idea of what they're talking about. They don't understand the Randle cycle. They don't understand a lot of things about physiology, and they make conclusions based on these manufactured studies. It's like
Sure.
the whole industry, the medical industry. They do multiple studies until they find a group that basically doesn't react so bad to medication, and then they do a study on them and they ignore all the others, to avoid showing side effects or severe side effects. A lot of this, unfortunately, the academia, because it's become corrupted with money, politics and stuff like that, it's, pretty abysmal. And as I said, around 2005, when a lot of these low-carb diets were being done worldwide and being funded out of Harvard and the National Institute of Health, they were actually not too bad, those studies. And there were actually a number of them were randomized control. Studies like the Israel one, which was a direct study at the Winona nuclear facility, and there they actually fed them one meal a day and provided them with some of the food. So it was actually even better control than even Christopher's, where Christopher's was basically done in a certain way. So when we look at that's a year doing a high animal-based diet, and you get better results from not an N of 1 like hers, but actual study. We do not see this at all. So what she's claiming is complete and utter ridiculous. The China study is complete and utter ridiculous, because the blue book, because it was actually on epidemiology of a number of counties in China. That's what actually had some funny long name to it. It wasn't even called the China study. That was actually the book that T. Colin Campbell wrote many years later, when he was, trying to become popular, like this woman, vain, and trying to win, run on the popularity of the vegan diet and the plant-based diet, that he actually did a complete backflip. It's been debunked many times. When people have gone back to the actual data of the actual research, the Chinese are eating more animal foods, were living longer and healthier. The only ones that had some issues with cancer or whatever had to do with aflatoxin from the fish in certain waterways. That's all that was, and it's in the data in the blue book. It's a big, thick blue book, which would take you months to go through and read all. It's just numbers, statistical numbers, and that's pretty much what the China study really was. And then T. Colin Campbell did a 180 flip on it for popularity purposes. I'll let people decide on the ethical or how they consider that person in light of what I've said. And there's a lot of other academics and a lot of other people that have actually debunked that. I've even got a video that covers that. So it's a non-issue. They don't really have any solid evidence, and the N15 data for us is a slam dunk, because if the N15 data was really, wasn't there, then people can claim whatever. But if people are basically living on in a hyper-carnivore, super-carnivore state for thousands of years, and that's what the N15 data shows, the collagen in the bones of our ancestors, then pretty much, nobody's got an argument to say that the carnivore diet or a highly carnivorous diet is contraindicated. It's complete and utter nonsense, because it doesn't bear out. And thousands of years of adaptation, people can't argue against that. Any species that goes down the wrong physiological pathway dies out.
Sure.
So foods are specific to species. She basically is not, any high IQ person, obviously, has no idea, has no background in, she's just one of the run-of-the-mill, just jumped on the carnivore bandwagon for a while, had a stroke, which was caused by a completely different issue and nothing to do with her diet, and pretty much now she's doing a backflip and claiming certain things that are completely and utterly ridiculous. But anyway,
It's like she's gone Paul Saladino XL version. Like, just got rid of all the meat. Yeah. You made a point a minute ago about the Randle cycle. Now, people listening to this might not understand what that is. I understand, we're not all well versed in science and biochemistry, things like that. So I'm going to put on the screen now, basically what it is. If you could maybe explain like what the different pathways are and how it kind of works.
Obviously, you've got GLUT4 where glucose is coming through. Right through to pyruvate. It goes through a number of enzymatic steps, so, and then it gets to pyruvate, and then from there it goes to acetyl-CoA, and from there it'll go into the Krebs cycle. But, and from the other end, you've got CD36, which is a receptor site that fat will come through, and it will come through via beta oxidation, as it's called, and end up acetyl-CoA back into the Krebs cycle as well. And there you're actually stripping off from the carbon backbone the hydrogens, and the hydrogens then will go in, and from those you'll actually generate ATP energy. The electrons through the electron chain, the protons get pumped through into the inner mitochondrial membrane. From there they go through this little motor which is called the ATPase that generates ATP. So it pops these protons through as they go through under the pressure of the gradient that actually is generated on the inside, and depending on the gradient within that inner mitochondrial membrane, the gradient will determine the RPM, how fast. So if you've got more, you can push through because your redox potential is good, which means that the electron chain is working properly, pumping stuff through and things like that, and it's not damaged or being oxidized or stuff like that from, things like, and the cardiolipin right at the end of complex 4, there's cardiolipin. That is a PUFA. So if you've got the wrong PUFA, it's not from animal sources, but it is from seed oils, that's going to be damaged, oxidized, and actually it will allow protons to basically seep through that, so your proton gradients will reduce. That means there'll be less pressure going through the ATPase, which means that the actual motor, the nanomotor, will rotate slower. So you won't have the 9,000 RPMs, you may have 4,000 RPMs, less energy production, you'll feel more lethargic and all that. Obviously, also, if you're eating appropriate foods, the high deuterium, which is all the carbohydrates and all that, good luck to Beth, with all the high deuterium foods. She'll be slowing down her nanomotors long term. And so if you're actually taking from glucose, you're going to be getting more. If you're eating excessive amounts, the body, there is enzymatic steps. There's only so many enzymatic steps. There's a rate limiting how much it can actually remove the deuterium isotopes, which is the other heavy isotope. And that will actually affect also the energy production. So it's not only the substrates that are coming in, it can actually affect this, but also the deuterium levels can slow down the production of ATP as well. So that can also affect energy production. But generally speaking, think of the Randle cycle in the most simplistic way. You've got 2 receptor sites, 2 doors, GLUT4, CD38. They're coming through 2 groups of people at the same time. If you're trying to get 2 groups of people on the Ferris wheel, which is the Krebs cycle, right at the bottom below the green stuff, going into the Krebs cycle, there you're going to force both ends to be basically blocked off in a severe Randle cycle activation. If you've got, like in this case, where you're actually got more glucose and less fat, you're actually blocking out fat. If you've got more fat and less glucose, you'll block out the other way, So and if you've got too much of both, that means high gradient, Randle cycle gradient, which means you've got a lot of both fat and sugar in the bloodstream and in the cells, then you're going to be blocking both those pathways, and the cells are going to lock out completely and not allow anything until those substrates are oxidized down through the Krebs cycle into the mitochondria and produce ATP, and then the level of energy within the cell drops to a certain level where the cell then will start opening up to take in more more glucose or fat, whatever's available at the time. So that can vary depending on what substrates at any time are within those close to those tissue types. But the Randle cycle is really basically this inability to get too many people, if you think on a Ferris wheel, which is a Krebs cycle. So if you've got one door open, only the fat door, the coming down the CD 36 door coming through that one group, which is fat, well then that can get on the Ferris wheel at a nice rate, at a normal rate. The same thing through if you're only on the high carb diet, low fat, that can go through. You inhibit the other pathway, you can actually put stuff at a regular sort of rate. It's much easier to manage in that regard. The moment you actually put in both in large amounts, you will cross-inhibit over time. Initially, you'll inhibit one or the other, depending on which substrate of fuel, food fuel is coming in. Glucose or fat is in the cell at any one time, and it can vary from one cell to the other, which is being cross-inhibited, depending on what the quantity of each one of them is in that regard. And if there's too much, then it'll just inhibit both until it deals with that amount of, substrates of energy, which is the glucose and the fat inside the actual cell. So just think of it, I usually say to people, as a Ferris wheel that is rotating and taking in either from pyruvate or beta oxidation. It's taking in, and it can't take in both at the same time. And something has to give. And it'll, if there's too many people coming through, it's going to inhibit both. If there's more of one group or the other, it will prioritize one group or the other. And that is individual to every single cell. There is a gradient and a variant right through. So it's a dynamic system. It's not sort of, and it varies throughout the whole body. Obviously, if you increase the insulin to glucagon ratio, that means high insulin. You've got high insulin and very low glucagon in your system. That means you've got a lot of energy substrates. That's what it indicates, really. That's sort of the standard diet, like going to McDonald's and eating a whole lot of crap with with a soda and all the other stuff, chips and whatever else. And there you've got excessive amounts of all these different energy substrates, and you're going to cause this sort of blockade. And you're going to activate the Randle cycle, and you're going to overstimulate insulin because it's trying to get all the excess stuff of fat and sugar that's in the bloodstream out of the bloodstream. And so to put it somewhere, if it can't force it into the cells, it's going to try and force it into the fat cells. That's why you have this overactivation of insulin, which people call the insulin-resistant construct, but that's what it is, and pretty much you also will see the activation of mTOR and IGF-1, not only insulin, but mTOR and IGF-1 in the fat cells, not in the muscle or the bones. Glucose forces that in there. Protein is what, leucine in particular, is what actually does it in the muscle skeletal. So we need to stop confusing the two. These longevity gurus have no idea what they're talking about. mTOR and IGF-1 signaling is completely different in the muscle skeletal and the fat cells, and glucose and protein are the ones. So when you do studies with only glucose or only fat, you actually see this difference. Or with the Randle cycle activation. The problem is they're doing it on mixed macronutrient diets, which is on the standard diets. They're engaging the Randle cycle and they're just concluding, high mTOR, high IGF-1 is the problem, when it's not. It depends on which tissue type it's actually being activated in.
Yeah.
Again, it's just a lot of poor research and pre-existing assumptions and pre-existing ideologies. It's only the scientists that actually have done research in the low-carb space, both like, Jeff Volek and Finney, people like that, Stephen Finney, people like that who have actually done research, Ben Bickman and people that have done specific research in the low carb community, Eric Westman, they actually have seen the differences in how the physiology responds and have done research. The problem is they haven't been cited in the literature because most of the people out there are paid by the food industry and actually cite each other because they're all mates, but they don't cite these low-carb doctors, and pretty much they don't get a lot of citations. So their information isn't as well known out there, which is the biggest problem. And that's the struggle that we fight continuously to try and get that research known. Now you understand why Christopher Gartner, when he did his randomized control study trial with the A to Z, why he got so much stick and abuse from the low-fat community, because it really undermined their narrative so much that they were really angry with him. That's why he walked away from that type of research completely after 2005, and he hasn't done any randomized controlled trials in nutrition. He does all these nonsensical, small, short-term, really well-constructed to push narratives type studies for a couple of weeks or whatever. And it's really disingenuous, but, that's the sort of people these people are. They're more
But the reason why,
kudos.
yeah, I mean, the reason why I brought this up, and everyone's probably thinking, why do you bring up the Randle cycle? The reason is because she went from a diet which is protein and fat, so she was keto for probably 5 years, carnivore for about a year. Now she switched to a different diet where her diet is predominantly carbohydrates, I imagine, rather than carbohydrate and fat. So the Randle cycle comes into it because she switched up that gradient, so from a higher fat, lower carb diet to a higher carb, lower fat diet. And obviously, like you mentioned earlier, Harry, we all have a species-specific diet. Now, there aren't, animals out there that are thriving that eat a diet with lots of fat and lots of sugar in the bloodstream at any given time. So this is why it's relevant. Now, I was wondering what are the implications of
Relevant. It is relevant. What is a vegan diet? What's a vegan diet? Do you know the traditional thing that what a vegan diet is?
Sugar.
A vegan diet is actually, actually it's slightly a lot of people need to understand the history of diets before they actually make any claims. The vegan diet is actually a fasting mimicking diet. That's what it is. In its basic core definition, that's what it is. Most religious people take out all the animal foods and eat only some plants, which is a fasting mimicking diet. That's what they all do. Even in the Greek Orthodox faith, many of the monks do that. They've been doing it for thousands of years. This is not a new diet, but it's only supposed to be used for a limited period of time. It's a very catabolic diet, so you'll lose weight, and she's quite thin as it is, and it also is nutrient deficient diet.
she's an older lady as well, Harry. I mean, she's not 20 years old. She's 50 plus. She needs the protein, and she's not going to be getting it eating bloody salads all day.
What's the consequence of that long term? The consequence of long term is going to be less muscle mass, less bone density, and all the other frailties that come with a fasting mimicking diet like the vegan diet is. That's the
Yeah. What's interesting to me is, I mean, you look at her on the screen now, she doesn't present as someone that just had a stroke. But before this point, she was following a carnivorous or a ketogenic diet for the most part. So that tells me, obviously, her health state was good. Now she's bollocked it up, basically.
Let me just ask you something. What do you get actually in a carnivore diet?
All the essential nutrients with the least toxins.
My favorite nutrient.
Taurine. Taurine.
Exactly. So what does taurine do? Taurine actually,
Senescent cells.
it inhibits. It's one of the other things that it does. It inhibits oxidative stress with red blood perfusion. The moment you have either a heart attack or a stroke, right after that, the red blood perfusion, I've showed it in some of my videos, red blood perfusion that happens, taurine actually reduces oxidative stress. Because what happens is when you get either a clot that actually stops the blood supply in a certain area, you get certain hypoxia that actually emerges. And the moment blood rushes back in oxygenated blood, you get severe oxidative stress because you've already got a lot of tissue damage. And the tissue isn't in a state where it can actually deal with it. And so It can't absorb it in the normal way. And so what you have is a lot of reactivity. That usually, red blood perfusion is what actually causes a lot of the fibrosis and damage inside the heart or inside the brain from a stroke. The thing that actually mitigates it, and it's actually been shown in animal and human studies and across the board when it comes to strokes and heart disease, when it comes to red blood perfusion, taurine. If you supplement taurine or you give a rat taurine after causing it a heart injury or a stroke, an induced stroke, in an experiment, you can basically mitigate the severe damage and recover much better. Being on a carnivore diet, she would be on a diet that would give her the highest amount of taurine, both synthesized and in the diet itself. That is what actually possibly played a big role in her quicker recovery than anything else. Now she's throwing that protective dietary approach away. She's putting herself at risk long term because she's got an underlying condition, and that's not going to basically get resolved by just changing the diet. Okay. So let's just listen to her. These are her own words 6 months ago.
Healthy diet going forward, because the studies show if you have one stroke, often you will have a second stroke, which was not something I wanted. But the reason for the stroke is that I have a tiny burst defect in my heart, which is a little tiny hole in my heart. And what?
So she's got a hole in the heart. This is important. This is not the normal physiology. Now, why would you have a hole in the heart? We know that in dogs and cats, holes in the heart, and we suspect the same thing in humans, is due to the deficiency in taurine in particular. Taurine is involved in heart remodeling. So if her mother, for instance, didn't have enough protein in her diet, when she wouldn't be able to synthesize enough of the amino acid taurine from cysteine, or if her mother wasn't eating, in more supplementing or whatever, her breast milk wouldn't have enough either. And so, because one of the key things that you get from taurine is, that you get from mother's milk is a lot of taurine. Like human breast milk has the highest quantity of taurine of all mammalian breast milk. There's a reason for it, because what it does is it is actually involved in stem cell activation inside the brain to produce new brain cells. And humans have more brain cells than any other species for their size. And so it is critical that they get more taurine. So the taurine plays an important role. Now, if you don't get enough from the diet, the body will prioritize the brain more than any other organ, which means that you will end up with certain heart type defects and heart type problems and a few other things, because the second organ that has the highest concentration of well, there is the eye as well. I shouldn't forget, but the one outside the brain cavity or the skull is basically the heart. So if you don't get enough taurine at birth, you can end up with this problem. So that's where the problem is coming from that she's got. So we'll just listen to her a bit more.
Doctors think happened is a week before I had my stroke, I was taking a long plane trip. It was like 6 hours, and I didn't have compression stockings on. Now I know you should always wear compression stockings anytime you fly, sit for a long time, anytime you're in a car for a long time, that sort of thing. So basically, he thought a blood clot formed in my leg, and then it went to my heart. And usually, in people without the hole in the heart, that little clot would be filtered through the lungs and broken down into small pieces, and it shouldn't be harmful.
Exactly. So if this is the condition that she has. I'll just increase so people can actually see.
Yeah.
Can you actually see that very well?
I see it. All good. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So this is the condition she's actually got, which is a hole in the heart. Okay, that's normal. That's a hole in the heart, what she's got. So basically, you've got this unoxygenated blood coming through here. And so that will actually go all the way through here and actually go up through here and into the actual lungs, okay? And then they'll be reoxygenated in that regard. So that's coming from the veins. So on the other side, you've got from the actual, coming in from the actual lungs, the oxygenated stuff will come through and then get pumped right through, because that's the big pump, that's the bigger pump, the stronger pump, the left ventricular. That's one that actually overgrowths with athletes when they do too much cardio, steady state cardio, and then it'll actually go through the aorta, and that will go out through the body and all that. Obviously, it'll go to the brain and all that. So obviously, if you're bringing back, because mostly you get a lot of the clots in the veins, and they'll go through into the actual. But if they're going through here, they can actually go through here and go up to the heart. That's what's actually happening. Okay? So obviously, she's got a clot in her leg. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually going to cause the problem. Okay? So we need to be careful, because the doctor said, well, possibly, and actually, what would cause that? Well, let's take a look. Athletes, this is athletes and clots. However, we do know, let me just increase it. Why isn't it going up?
That's good, yeah. Yeah.
However, we do know that blood levels of clotting factor, protein factor 8 increase with exercise, and the elevation persists during recovery. This could lead to increased risk of blood clots in athletes, but data also indicates that fibrinolytic systems that dissolve blood clots is overactivated in people who exercise, and that's what happens. But now you've got a clot in the actual leg. She's just done exercise. She's forced that out. It hasn't gone through the proper approaches of going through and being broken down. It goes in, because you've got elevated, remember, at the same time. So the body's dealing with a lot of other clots, which is a normal thing that happens under stress. The body's put under stress. You do get, because you're actually also having to protect, because you're putting the body under blood pressure. When you put the thing under blood pressure, strokes happen when part of the brain doesn't get blood vessels damaged. So blood vessels damaged by high blood pressure, narrow, break, leak. Okay? Leak. And high blood pressure also can cause blood clots to form in the arteries leading to the brain. The clots can block blood flow and raising the risk of stroke. What does the exercise do? It increases blood pressure. So if you've got an underlying condition where you're actually pushing up certain blood clots, that doesn't, and you've got the normal mechanisms of breaking those down, which you do, we all do, and it's only in special conditions, but you're also under pressure. You will get some level of little damage here and there. Like with food, you get oxidative stress. Like with exercise, you get some oxidative, so some pressure, some stress, some damage or whatever, but it's very minor. It gets repaired. That's why clotting goes up slightly, nothing to worry about, and then goes down after. That is normal stuff. That's another reason why I like to train without having food in my system. So another reason. Let's just get back to it. So this is what is actually happening. The clot would have come through here, popped through here, through the aorta, into the brain, bang. And it would have been possibly, if there was a clot there from the plane, trip under the pressure and additional clotting and all that, there could have been more than just one clot. It may have not been the clot that was actually like that, but under all that, there could have been some additional. When you get one clot in certain locations, sometimes you can actually, under exercise or under stress of that same issue, you can actually, in your legs and a whole lot of other things, cause more clots to occur when you don't have good circulation, affecting circulation for whatever reason. So doing the exercise, you would increase it when you've got existing small blockages, you can increase in the small veins even more, and as a consequence, you actually will actually increase slightly the clotting factor coming back this way and seeping through here would actually be a condition. So she needs to be very careful. It doesn't matter what diet she's on. She needs to be very careful when it comes to that sort of travel and excessive exercise as well, because she has that vulnerability with clotting factors. Maybe she should be taking an aspirin, when she's basically doing, or something that actually reduces, and also citrulline to increase vasodilation and help reduce that sort of clotting effect as well, because it has a reduction in clotting effect as well when you've got increased vasodilation. Earthing would be another good thing and stuff like that for her condition in particular. So I don't think she understands her sort of condition. Then this is cardiac, and this is a case study. As I said, I don't know her condition. There are certain people that have got a genetic predisposition that they don't encode well the gene which actually produces taurine. And so that's another thing that people that need to consider with generally their lifestyle. Because if she basically has switched to a diet and she's got even some of the vulnerabilities of this gene, she could be put herself at a lot of risk in the future, far more than now. So that's another thing that she needs to realise. And, the last one, this is one of Steve's, Steve, Coach Stephen from, good mate of yours. This is a lady.
I know Audra. I edit her videos.
She basically had a CAC score of 265.8. She went on a carnivore diet.
It was 265.8. They said, hey, we'll keep an eye on this. We might need to go down the road of a statin.
Typical nonsense.
At the time, between 200 and 400 was considered moderate calcification. So, like I said, that was in 2014. Mine was like $99, and I had it done, and my score is now a 16.
There you go.
Substantial.
Exactly. That is a substantial drop. That's not, like 100% drop. That's quite a big drop in percentage points down. So we're talking about a substantial reduction in CAC. But that's, my experience as well with my cardiovascular disease. Red blood perfusion, perfect. Fibrosis, zero fibrosis in my heart, even though I had a mild heart attack. And technically speaking, you're not supposed to heal. But I looked at the research and found that taurine, which is in animal foods and produced when you eat enough protein, actually reduces fibrosis. So after a decade and the remodeling and turnover of my cells, well, all gone. So you can heal. The body can heal if you give it the right nutrients. Unfortunately, this lady, who's completely ignorant about physiology and many other things, she's even more ignorant than even other academics out there who are quite ideologically have their minds twisted with, ridiculous thinking. But she's completely outside her lane, way outside her lane. She has no capacity. At least I come from an engineering background, in a sense, my field.
Something.
Spatial science. And so we have some capacity to deal with data, some capacity to look at information and understand it a bit deeper than somebody like her. And obviously she's just been taken by a charlatan like Esselstyn, and unfortunately it may not end well for her long term. So I do feel for her as a fellow human, but unfortunately we have to call out the nonsense that she's claiming, because it is nonsense and it's dangerous that people may think that these arguments are proper. We need to be well aware of all that. And when we actually look at other conditions, these are all the things that can happen when you're on an inappropriate diet low in taurine, you can actually get one of these conditions that's a typical, where this will either grow in size and you'll have really low sort of blood pressure, and you'll have things not really working very well, and even conducting properly.
Mm.
And it's away. And the left ventricular, as it's called, they call it hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but it's called left ventricular hypertrophy. This is what it is, actually. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
They just call it a different name. And it affects the sort of the way
The pump
it
action.
pumps. So again,
Yeah.
that's a problem. That's a problem in itself as well. And this you get from steady state cardio and lack of taurine, because taurine inhibits this left ventricular. So a carnivore diet that actually furnishes you with enough methionine and cysteine to basically synthesize, and you also need B6. That's another thing that many people don't realize, because B6 is also used by methylation. So if you're eating enough animal foods, what are you getting? You're also getting choline, and choline goes through into the methionine cycle of methylation, that brings down homocysteine. And what it does is it spares folate, B12, and B6, which is really important. And B6 then can help synthesize more taurine, which helps with all the other biological, the osmotic regulation of minerals and everything else in the body, and the proper functioning of a lot of parts of physiology. On top of that, which is really another important element, that when you move away from a carnivore diet, your detox pathways. Remember with what I was saying earlier when we were having a chat, that you need a whole lot of amino acids, especially the sulfur amino acids, for detoxification. And if you don't have enough, you can't detox well. If your basically gallbladder isn't working well, you can't excrete minerals, certain minerals, especially heavy metals and other things like that. Excess retinol, excess minerals, or whatever else. When the organs are working properly, when you're on an indicated diet, then all these things work properly, then you've got no problems. Unfortunately, most people walk away from a species-appropriate diet for whatever reason. Unfortunately, this lady has had something that has nothing to do with the diet. It's a hole in the heart. And unfortunately, because she's ignorant about how it works, how the physiology works, she thinks that if she takes away the fat and takes away, that will actually reduce somehow the clotting factor magically. It's just nonsense. Because fat, glucose, and all that have nothing to do with clotting factors. There's a whole lot of other things. Randle cycle is a big thing that can actually cause clotting factors, but it's not the only thing. Blood pressure, which usually high insulin that you get from eating indicated food, and specifically a lot of glucose, you'll get far higher insulin levels, and that will also increase clotting factors. So I think she's putting herself at greater risk, and she's also taking away the foods that can actually provide protection.
Not helping.
Especially taurine. So unfortunately,
Harry, I've got a question for you, Harry. Would you say she was a ticking time bomb?
long term, potentially, yes. Now, usually this condition is actually dealt with at a young at birth. When if it's picked up, it's usually easier to be dealt with at birth. Once the heart actually has fully modelled, in a sense, it's a bit harder to do. You can still do the operation, don't get me wrong. You can go in there and actually, because you can actually go through and, how you replace valves and stuff like that in the heart. You can do. It is a risky intervention because the tissue there is a bit thin and all that. So they have to they have to take a bit of tissue from elsewhere and sort of try and actually stitch it all up together. So it's not an easy operation. It's a lengthy operation. It's involved in all that. It's an expensive operation, so I have no idea whether she's got insurance, because America, she's in the US. In Australia, you'd probably be able to do it through the public system, but in the US and in the UK as well. But in the US, it's probably you'd have to be out of pocket as an adult. And so I'd probably, even as a young person, your family would have to be out of pocket. So it's a very different ball game. And so ultimately, if I had her condition, I'd be taking high doses, not low doses of taurine every single bloody day. I can tell you that. That'd be one thing. And the other thing is I'd be taking, now I take occasionally when I'm exercising, stuff like that, citrulline, but I'd be taking citrulline every day as well. And to basically and I'd be earthing myself like mad. I'd be trying to keep the clotting factors down as much as possible in that regard. So I'd be living a very different lifestyle. I wouldn't be doing high intensity of anything in terms of exercise and stuff like that. I would be doing like more walking, stuff like that. Lightweight lifting and stuff like that, nothing heavy.
Just for strength.
Too high.
Yeah, just bone density stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, bone density stuff. More of just weight bearing, because weight bearing, you can actually hold on to stuff and that can give you weight bearing without. We're talking about here stressing the body. She's doing high intensity. She was doing high intensity plus stressing the body quite a bit, which is fine if you don't have this condition. But if you have this condition, you're going to be basically increasing the clotting factors, which is not a problem because your body can deal with it, can break them down and get rid of them. It's not as if she's in an unhealthy condition, but she's got an underlying condition which creates an additional vulnerability. And here lies the problem. And and also she's on a diet that actually provides her with material to be able to better break these things down and also mitigate any risks. Now she's taking all that away. So obviously her risk factor has gone up. By how much? It's so many factors. It's lifestyle factors. There's how much do you earth? How much do you do this? How much do you do that? There's too many question marks. So how risk it is for her is varied, but obviously changing her dietary approach has definitely increased the risk for her.
Absolutely. So we're not bashing her here, guys. Obviously we don't like what she said. We don't like how she came across. We don't like the fact that she's ignorant. But we're trying to be productive here. So Harry's obviously given his very honest scientific summary. We put some stuff on the screen so you can see exactly what's happening, some of the biology that's at play, the physiology, pathophysiology, and hopefully that gives us some insights into what she needs to do moving forward. So she can't now say, these people don't talk to me. No one's going to help me. I need to speak to bloody Esselstyn.
Yeah, I'm willing to chat with her if she wants to chat with me. So if she wants to approach me, I'm willing to come onto her channel and have a chat with her or with anyone else, or if anyone else knows her or subscribes to her, because I don't personally subscribe to her, and wants to send her a message and stuff like that, go right ahead. But I think that, I am worried about her in that regard. I think that she is ignorant about the way the body works and a number of these issues regarding to her specific condition. And I think that, and I'm quite sometimes aghast and shocked how the medical community sort of deal with this. If it's not an acute problem, go away until it becomes an acute problem, and then we'll medicate you and deal with you. It's really... It's so managed care and so money driven that unfortunately modern medicine has become definitely the Hippocratic oath has been jettisoned out of modern medicine a long time ago, but that's the reality she has to deal with, and the majority of us have to deal with. Unfortunately, she's going to a contraindicated lifestyle and diet that's going to put her at risk long term. And so, you know, it's an unfortunate situation. We're just pointing this out, bringing up the reasons behind what has happened to her, the reasons why they've happened, and that she needs to be aware that she's increasing the risk factors. Because as you said, as we saw with Audrey, we saw that CAC score went down. As we've seen with proper randomized control trials that even done by people like Christopher Gardner, who is a plant-based academic. Atkins came first, across the board. If you want to Google Battle of the Diets, Christopher Gardner, Stanford University, it's on the Stanford University website, Battle of the Diets, you'll actually be able to see him going through, and actually he comes up with a lot of he's an aggravating person for a person like me, because he comes up with a lot of bullshit reasons why the Atkins diet was better. But it was a traditional Atkins diet. And the traditional Atkins diet is not like the new Atkins diet. The new Atkins diet now being promoted in the low carb community is more plant-based orientated, or has more plants and less animal foods. The traditional one that was done by Atkins was bacon and eggs. That was your breakfast, bacon and eggs. So you could actually, it was a very high animal based style of diet with some vegetables here or there in your evening meal or your lunch. But the majority of the diet was basically around milk, dairy, meats, and seafood. That's what was the core, was pretty much heavily animal based in that regard. And that's because they did the original Atkins diet, not the new one. They got the original book, copies of the original book, and went through and told people, read that. That's what you're going to apply to your daily living. So, and they were hoping that they would show that it was actually really bad for you. They were shocked when they got the complete opposite. And when people were actually complying through the first 6 months, they got the best weight loss. But that's understandable, because if you take a look at some of the research that's been done out there, that was one that Bickman actually did, Ben Bickman, that actually showed when people were actually doing a low carb diet about 20, they were losing rapidly weight. And when they actually went back, then they had to force them back up to 120 grams in order not to lose weight as fast. The researchers had actually modified the diet in between the study, which they shouldn't have done that, but that's what they did, because they wanted to try and keep them, because they were trying to keep them at the same of hypercaloric. But these guys were losing while the other ones were actually gaining. And then the other one was the Guy Feldman, the guy in Britain that actually did that case study of 5,800 calories, or kilocalories. But anyway, we know that they're just a form of heat. Otherwise, I'll upset Ted. But even though this guy was eating quite a lot, low fat and low carb, in the low fat, he actually put on weight. He put 9.2 kilos, and in the actual the low fat one, even though he was doing in the low carb one, even though he was doing 87 grams of carbohydrates, which is quite high. It's not like your 20 odd. It's like, what bodybuilders would do in that regard. They do a lot of milk and stuff like that. They'd get up to about the 80 to 100 or 90, around about there, sort of a heavy bodybuilder's sort of diet. What was the result? Exactly what bodybuilders get. They basically went up 1.3 kilos only. Wasn't a lot, but that was pretty much muscle, the majority of it, and they actually lost some fat. And where the other guys, their waist circumference went up. I can't remember, it was
went up quite a bit. Yeah. We'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up there, guys, now anyway. Yeah.
His actually went down. His actually went down by 3 centimeters, which shows quite clearly that it was just basically he was gaining muscle from the high protein, because it doesn't have, when you're healthy, you don't get much of an effect in terms of insulin. All these studies where they show high insulin from protein, that's nonsense. That's all to
Yeah.
do with diabetic people. So let's
Yeah.
not confuse the two. So the reality is that if you want a healthy diet that's species appropriate, it's always been the carnivore diet. The N15 data basically states that, and most of the other information. Unfortunately for this lady, she's unaware of this archaeological evidence. She's unaware of this information, and she hasn't looked into some of the actual proper research, the good quality research out there. So she's completely ignorant. And unfortunately, now she's been entangled with these charlatans like Esselstyn and co, who
Yeah.
have basically filled her mind with a whole lot of nonsense and selective the way they promote their data and all that, which is just nonsense. I mean, we know that in the situation with the Norwegian people, it was the disengagement of the Randle cycle. These people were starving. Anybody in a starvation mode, basically, it doesn't matter whether they're on a low carb starvation or a high carb starvation.
Yeah.
If you're overeating, your insulin comes down, and your body fat actually, because you need to survive, your body will deliberately, in a low, what they call low calorie state, or low taking in food energy, your insulin will go naturally down. It doesn't matter what the substrate, because it's the disengagement. It's no Randle cycle. You don't get a Randle cycle. And so, so that's just nonsense. And that's, again, smoke and mirrors from trying to promote a fasting mimicking diet, which was a forced starvation diet on the Norwegian population, as something healthy. You could probably do it for a short period. You try to do it for a decade, you'll waste away and look like some of those emaciated people or emaciated fruitarians. That's what you'll look like.
Yeah.
And that's what she'll look like if she goes down this pathway.
That's right. Well, I'll link your channel below, Harry. So if anyone's wondering who this is, it's Harry Serpanos. He's currently in some kind of weird ban, so he may or not be able to comment on this video. But look out for his channel. I'll also link some of the playlists he's got below on some of the cardiovascular stuff. Some of the health stuff as well might be useful for you guys to see. And it'll all be in the description box below. I'll also add in some timestamps of different points we talked over. The Randle cycle, the pathophysiology of the heart, the condition she we think we actually has, and also the genetic defect that she could possibly have. And I'll also tag her in this video so she can see it and make her own mind up. And if she doesn't like what we have to say, that's Darwinism for you. And that's the end of it. So there we go. All right.
True, exactly. But remember, she does have the defect. Her doctor confirmed it. She actually said in the video. So the doctor did confirm her condition. That is her condition. And that's why I actually had to play that. So people knew quite clear that came out of her own mouth. That was nothing I created or speculated or stated. That is actually her own words saying that her own doctor tested her and confirmed that she had a hole in the heart.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for coming on, Harry. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, mate, for having me on.
Cheers. Build muscle and lose fat on the carnivore diet.